In too many parts of the U.S., we preserve the ugly stains of this country's racism while eliminating memories of the thriving Black communities that once stood strong. Black towns like Rosewood, Florida, and neighborhoods like Greenwood and Tulsa, Oklahoma, were a testament to the strength, innovation, and independence of their residents until they were destroyed by white mobs. Lake Lanier is a chilling reminder of anti-Black violence that is still claiming Black lives today. On September the 7th, this was like in the 1950s, I believe, Sheriff William Reed arrested 2 Black men concerning the murder of Sleety May Crow. However, before being brought to trial, a mob seized Robert Edwards, a 24-year-old farmhand from the jail. They beat him to death before hanging him from a telephone pole in the town square. After these incidents, the violence and terror that swept through Forsyth County led every Black person to flee the area. Only 24 of the nearly 40 Black landowners in Forsyth County at the time could sell their land. The other properties have no sale record. Some believe white residents took the abandoned land. But there is another story that goes untold about Forsyth County, one that is hidden beneath the waters of Lake Sidney Lanier. Years later, in the 1950s, plans were made to build a reservoir. As the bulldozers and excavators began their work, they uncovered the long-buried remains of the Black community of Oscarville. Homes, churches, and graves were unearthed, revealing an intentionally erased history. I'll be back. Hey everyone, thank you for coming back. To those who are new, welcome. I just wanted to say that I would not have done this video if a precious subscriber didn't ask me to. I mean, I have seen a lot of videos talking about Lake Lanier, and I never ever considered doing a video myself, so I'm doing this. And hopefully it's some things you haven't heard before. If you have heard it before, just listen to it again and share it with some other folks that you think will be interested. And thank you, subscriber, for asking me to do this. Thank you so much. Let's get on with this. The Lake Lanier, stands as a reminder of the American history. Today's leaders are trying to erase and the parts of the history that deem worthy of preservation. Lake Lanier was named after Sidney Lanier, a poet and a Confederate soldier. During the Civil War, it's less than 50 miles north of Georgia's Stone Mountain, which features the country's largest Confederate monument. Despite protests and legislation aimed at the statue's removal, it has remained in place. Lake Lanier is a man-made 38,000-acre lake that attracts about 10 million visitors every year, bringing in around $5 billion annually to North Georgia's economy. The lake is located in the affluent Forsyth County, which has the highest median income in Metro Atlanta. This fact is especially interesting considering that the body of water covers what was once a thriving Black community called Oscarville. That community, formed during the late 1800s, was filled with successful farmers, carpenters, and blacksmiths, until Oscarville's more than 1,000 residents were violently forced out by white Forsyth County residents. The lake's story began more than 100 years ago. In September 1912, a white 18-year-old named May Crow was found injured after being assaulted in woods less than a mile from her family's home. She later died from the wounds. Despite the absence of witnesses or evidence, a 24-year-old black man, Rob Edwards, was arrested. Edwards was then taken from the county jail by a mob of white residents, brutally beaten with crowbars, shot repeatedly, and dragged to the town square where his mutilated body was hung. Additionally, Edward's wife, Jane Daniel, their neighbor Ed Collins, Jane's cousin Oscar Daniel, and Oscar Daniel's cousin Ernest Knox were arrested. Knox and Oscar Daniel, both teens, were convicted by all white jurors before being hung in front of about 5,000 spectators. Now, this story reminds me of videos I did last year called Unintentional Lynching. I believe that's the title, but basically a black man was accused of killing a little white boy. Come to find out, he didn't do it. One of the friends of the family, or a man who knew the boy, killed him. I think he killed him and robbed him. I don't remember the details, but a lot of the times when these white people ended up getting harmed or murdered or killed, black people were always blamed, and it gave them an excuse to go in and traumatize and destroy black communities. So let's continue. But yeah, go check out the video. I did it sometime last year. I believe it's called Unintentional Lynching. I'll probably put the thumbnail in this video. Okay, let's go on. In the aftermath of those brutal killings during September and October 1912, mobs of white people set fire to local black churches and black-owned businesses. They forced all of the black residents out of the county. All of the Negro people had to leave, said Elon Osby, a descendant of black landowners in the county. There was knocking on the door and they were told to get out. Osby's mother, Willie Mae Bagley, was just 2 years old when the family was forced to flee their home. Tax records show Osby's grandparents, William and Ida Bagley, owned 60 acres. Enraged white people are driving blacks from county, declared the headline in the October 13, 1912 edition of the Atlanta Constitution. The article went on to say that recent outrages committed against white women in the county have so enraged the white people that many of them have determined to drive Negroes, good, bad, and indifferent from the county. Now you see why so many black people don't own land in this country, where they once owned acres of land that was taken from them. Let's continue. The racial cleansing started in 1912 but made national news in 1987 when activists marched into Cumming to bring awareness of the county's racist history. They were met by white residents with "Keep Forsyth White" signs, chanting the N-word and throwing rocks, showing that the racist history was not in the past. Also in 1987, on an episode of the Oprah Winfrey Show,
we bring you today to Forsyth County, Georgia, just 30 miles north of Atlanta, which in the past few weeks has gained the reputation of being a hotbed of racism. Here are just some of the images of Forsyth County in past weeks that were broadcast around the globe.
Oprah Winfrey visited Forsyth County, which at the time hadn't had a black resident in 75 years. Today, only 4.9% of the county's population is black, 9.7% is Hispanic, and an overwhelming 72.6% of residents are white, with 63.9% identifying as non-Hispanic white people. In the 1950s, what was once Oscarville was flooded by the creation of Lake Lanier. According to historians, many of the community structures were not removed, including unmarked graves. It's like I'll have to fight back tears for some reason. This is really like heartbreaking to me. And I don't even think I felt this way about Black Wall Street, although I have compassion and I don't like what happened. But this one, for some reason, this is hitting different. And what is enraging is how people who look like me were done in this country, robbed, stolen from, murdered, and then you still have cold-hearted people that deny justice, will intentionally sit in our face, stand in our face, and deny justice repeatedly. But then they'll show so much compassion for other groups, especially groups that don't have long standings or long, strong roots in this country. But let's continue. Legend has it the ghost of a long dead woman roams this lake in a flowing blue dress. Mysterious arms reach out for swimmers from the watery depths. Angry spirits call people home to submerged graves. These and other spooky tales have haunted Lake Lanier in the foothills of the northern Georgia mountains for decades. To many Georgians, the large lake northeast of Atlanta is a recreational hotspot popular for boating and water sports. But supernatural lore and urban legends about the lake have found a receptive audience on social media where they found legions of believers. The lake was created in the 50s by flooding valley communities that contained a cemetery, fueling beliefs that it's cursed. Historians say some unmarked graves and other structures were swallowed up by the waters. Here's the thing, even in the Bible, it says you're not supposed to mess with burial sites. So, yeah, that wasn't good at all. Let's continue. More than 200 people have died in swimming and boating accidents on the lake since 1994. Adding to its dark history, and the Netflix drama Ozark, which has its own body count, filmed scenes at the lake. Ooh, I didn't know that. And I'll watch Ozark. I sure do. But let's continue. The stories about mysterious underwater sightings are eerie, especially at Halloween. But the true backstory of Lake Lanier, built over an underwater ghost town, is just as interesting. The controversy surrounding the lake, as described by author and historian Lisa Russell, started long before its construction. Before the land was buried in water, it was lush and fertile with rabbits and squirrels scampering around. Communities thrived with fancy names like Castleberry Bottom, Russell said. Then came the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which wanted to create a lake to provide Atlanta and surrounding counties with power and water. The government offered locals money for their farmland. Most of it had been in families for generations, making it almost impossible to put a price tag on it. But Russell, a writing instructor at Georgia Northwestern Technical College and author of several books on the lost towns of North Georgia. The government offered locals money for their farmland. Most of it had been in families for generations, making it impossible, almost impossible, to put a price tag on it, said Russell, a writing instructor at Georgia's Northwestern Technical College and author of several books on the lost towns of North Georgia. At first, the government assured landowners that they were being paid for the true value of the land and buildings, but residents found it hard to price generations of memories, hard work, and deep roots. Russell wrote in her book, Underwater Ghost Towns of North Georgia. A host of emotions accompanied the talk of relocation: anger, resentment, fear, anxiety, bewilderment, and apprehension. To them, their land was priceless. Eventually, some 700 families sold a total of 56,000 acres to the government, which built a dam on the Chattahoochee River to form the lake. As their land filled with water in 1956, locals jammed roads and bridges to watch as history vanished before their eyes. Whatever they had abandoned was covered by the rising waters. Even Lake's naming was contentious, Russell said. Some local officials wanted to name it after Georgian politicians, others sought to name it after a legendary football coach. Eventually, they decided to name it Sidney Lanier, an 18th century Georgia poet who wrote Song of the Chattahoochee. Some families later regretted their decision once they realized they couldn't survive on what the government offered, Russell told CNN. But the lake brought multiple benefits, including flood protection from the Chattahoochee, which flows west of Atlanta. Today, Lake Lanier has about 625 billion gallons of water, the equivalent of 950,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools, and they yield mysterious stories. To prepare the land to be filled with water, the Army Corps of Engineers demolished or moved anything they considered dangerous. They uprooted trees and hauled them away. Barns and wooden structures that could float and endangered watercraft were moved. Major infrastructure such as bridges and water intakes were relocated. But the community had a cemetery. While the corpse identified and moved marked graves, it's likely that some unmarked ones were inadvertently left behind, said Caesar Yarborough, a spokesman for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The technological capability to identify and verify unmarked burial sites through subsurface scanning or other means was far less robust 70 years ago. While the Corps made every effort at the time to locate unmarked burials, he added, the limited capabilities of the time make it probable that unanticipated finds of human remains are possible, whether from the antebellum and Civil War periods or of Native American origin from pre-colonial and ancient times. My question, I would have to do a little more research on this topic or matter. Why did they have to choose that area? Out of all the areas in Atlanta or Georgia to build a dam, why did you have to choose that specific area? So let's continue. An old auto racing track near Gainesville was also left behind. It remains at the lake bottom, although the corpse removed its bleachers so they wouldn't float to the surface and cause a hazard for boats, Yaber said. The concrete block foundations of some small buildings also were submerged. Some people have claimed to hear church bells from a sunken church. Yaber told CNN that's not possible. No such structure was known to be left behind due to the height issue. If it had a steeple as well as the floating wood issue, he said. Didn't they say it had like 650 billion gallons of water? Do you know how high that is? So that wouldn't have been able to cover a structure without, a boat flowing over it and hitting it. Wouldn't it be boat? Okay, I would, like I said, I'll do some investigating. So let's continue. Over the decades, when the lake's water levels dropped during drought, submerged roads, tire parts, and other artifacts have been exposed, said Russell, the historian. Russell believes unmarked graves also were left behind because they were not easily identified and there was no family to claim them. A part of me believes that they really didn't put too much of an effort to locate those unmarked graves because they really gave not too much concern when it came to black folks. And I'm just being real. If you look at the history, okay, I did some videos talking about the racist past of Hollywood when it came to them doing demeaning, horrible movies about black folks. They were just lazy. If they weren't lazy, they were thieves and sex hounds and all that. And they basically they put an insert in the article I was reading, and basically the man was saying that they just really didn't care about how black people felt about the things they said or did. So I feel that when it came to these unmarked graves that contain the bones of black people, They didn't care. Just saying the history of how this country has treated people who look like me. Stop living in fairy tale lands, thinking that, when we talk about the past, the brutal, horrific past, that we're being, we're trying to hold on to the past. No, some of the things we're talking about was intentionally hidden, and we need to talk about it. So let's continue. To Russell, the changes wrought by the human-made lake are scarier than the spooky folklore. A haunting is sometimes defined as something that is difficult to ignore or forget. That is poignant and evocative, she said. The real haunting in this story is how history has made it impossible to ignore what was done to the land in North Georgia, she added. Once a land of wild rivers, North Georgia is now broken with dams and human-made bodies of water that change the ecosystem. Once a land that belonged to indigenous people is now buried under the water, making recovering of lost culture impossible. Over the years, divers have reported creepy sightings beneath the murky waters. Some tell stories of freaky catfish as big as a Volkswagen. YouTube is filled with divers showing videos of sunken houseboats and piles of debris. Between 1994 and October this year, 203 people have died in drownings and boating incidents at Lake Lanier, according to Mark McKinnon of the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. In 2017, longtime diver Buck Buchanan told local media that he sometimes felt body parts in the lake during his many excursions. You reach out into the dark and you feel an arm or a leg and it doesn't move, he said. But that has not affected the lake's popularity. With about 12 million visitors last year, Lake Lanier was one of the most visited corpse-built lakes in the nation, said Yaber of the Army Corps of Engineers, which operates 464 lakes in 43 states. Lake Lanier's size and popularity contribute to the tall tales, and its high visitation rate also means more fatalities. While we recognize that urban legends can develop over time, first and foremost is our concern for public safety. So we certainly do not want to create an inviting atmosphere for the curious to come out to Lake Lanier for urban exploration or similar risky acts. One of Lake Lanier's most popular urban legends involves a car wreck. According to the story, a Ford sedan carrying two women careened off a bridge in April 1958 and tumbled into the lake. Some say the ghost of one of the women, dubbed the Lady of the Lake, wanders the bridge at night in a blue dress, lost and restless. The horrific history of wiping out black communities and often simultaneously stripping black folks of their wealth is not unique to Lake Lanier. Alabama's Lake Martin, also man-made, covers a black community that formed in 1895, and residents of New York's Seneca Village, which was covered by Central Park, were forced out in 1857. Similarly, highways have been built over black communities for years, and recent reports of plans to build a highway through a black community in South Carolina are proof that this isn't a thing of the past. We live in a country that went from enslaving black people to wiping out the communities they built post-slavery. Today, some politicians are prohibiting the teaching of that history while simultaneously promoting a false account of that history. It's a heartbreaking testament to the legacy of racist cruelty that too many Americans insist on upholding. That will be the end, folks. Like I said, that was kind of hard for me. And if you look at the videos on this channel and see the things I talked about, the emancipation, slavery, just all kind of the black a black movement, liberation movement being bombed. Yeah, this was very hard for me for some reason to read, to do. I would like to also thank people who have come to this channel, even though you see what I discuss, Black American history, past and present, difficult things that a lot of people don't want to hear about. I would like to thank white Americans who came here, who said, and I can only go by your comments, who said you came here and you're enjoying what you're learning. I appreciate you. You know, like I said in other videos, I'm specifically speaking against racist white Americans. If you're not racist, if you're not biased, if you're not prejudiced, I am not talking to you. It doesn't matter what your ethnicity is, what your race is. If you're not any of those things I named aforementioned, I'm not talking to you. So, thank you. I'm shutting down the shop. I don't have much more to say other than thank you guys for your time and attention and your support. Whatever way you have chosen to support this channel positively, thank you so much. God bless you and yours. I'm shutting down the shop, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care and be safe.